LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out a little over 30 of the weekend's best clips for what should be a really good show for you tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows on the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. I also have several political comedy clips from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher last Friday, and one more from last night's Saturday Night Live. You can see the topics I'm covering listed down in the video description, and if you're watching this as a recorded show, you should see time indexes down there to skip to whatever topics most interest you. Tonight's topics include some follow-up clips on that framework of a nuclear deal with Iran that I had so many clips on last week. I also have several clips on the latest developments in the Republican race for president in 2016, with Rand Paul getting in the race and Marco Rubio about to get in. I'll have several clips on the issue of race and cops, with this video surfacing last week of a North Charleston, South Carolina police officer shooting an unarmed black man, Walter Scott, in the back and killing him. And I'll also have a few clips at the end on that perennial topic of Islamic extremism and whether religion or extremism gets more of the blame for its violence. This time with Bill Maher squaring off with Freed Zakaria, and Freed made some good arguments, I thought. But before I get to any of that, I have to start off with about a dozen clips on the breaking news that everyone expected, that Hillary Clinton is running for president. She announced in a video today that shows a diverse group of people talking about how they got ready for things, followed by this clip.
I'm getting ready to do something too. I'm running for president. Americans have fought their way back from tough economic times, but the deck is still stacked in favor of those at the top. Everyday Americans need a champion, and I want to be that champion. So you can do more than just get by. You can get ahead and stay ahead, because when families are strong, America is strong. So I'm hitting the road to earn your vote, because it's your time, and I hope you'll join me on this journey.
Now, I guess I like the theme of economic inequality, but you can even hear that from Republicans these days, I guess. And I didn't hear any big ideas yet, though it's real early, and I still have an open mind. And as much as people don't want a Clinton versus Bush repeat, it looks like it may well turn out that way in 2016. And Bill Maher actually joked about that during his monologue on Friday in the clip you can see over here.
But you know what, folks? You look at the polls, it's going to be Clinton and Bush again. It's so funny because everybody says, oh, God, we want somebody new. And then they look at the new people running like Ted Cruz and Rand Paul and Marco Rubio, and they go, you know, we need more Clintons and Bushes, I think. No,
So that was the way Bill Maher joked about the Hillary Clinton run for president. And I also thought I would show how Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update dealt with the same topic. I thought Colin Jost did a fairly good job of making jokes both about the ambition of Hillary Clinton and about her lack of opponents, in a clip that also threw in a couple Game of Thrones references, which, if you're a fan waiting for the start of the new season tonight like me, that is always fun, I guess, over in this clip.
This Sunday is the premiere of Game of Thrones. This season focuses on a woman from a once powerful family who will stop at nothing to claim her rightful place on the throne, based on the true story of Hillary Clinton. I guess that does explain Hillary's new campaign slogan, "Winter is coming." Sources say that tomorrow Hillary Clinton will formally announce her presidential campaign. Early polling shows that Hillary has a substantial lead over her nearest Democratic challenger, the margin of error.
So I don't know if her nearest Democratic opponent is the margin of error. I heard someone talking about Lincoln Chafee on one of the shows. I think I may show that clip a little later. And there's Jim Webb and Martin O'Malley and one person who I guess is not running, unfortunately, for a lot of people on the left feel it's unfortunate anyway, is Senator Elizabeth Warren, who is actually over on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, where Bill Maher kind of jokingly offered her $1 million if she got the nomination, if she ran and got the Democratic nomination, because he had this story this last week about how he would vote for Hillary Clinton but not give her $1 million. And you can see Senator Elizabeth Warren say pretty emphatically she's not running, but then also talk about the need to organize in a way that sounds almost like a candidate over in this clip.
Okay, well, let me ask a further question. Somebody from her camp was on record today saying that they're going to raise, in his words, an insane amount of money. And I've said, and I think you probably agree, that Citizens United was a terrible ruling that allowed pretty much unlimited money into politics. We seem to have policy now that is driven by Citizens United, in that candidates just want the money from one guy. Sheldon Adelson gave about $100 million. I think this is what is driving the anti-Iran rhetoric, the incredibly I mean, we're both pro-Israel, but not like the Republicans. It's just crazy. That's all because they want Sheldon Adelson's money. Same thing with the environment. They want the Koch brothers' money. Somehow, as bad as we thought Citizens United was, it's actually even worse.
No, I think you're exactly right about that. You know, Sheldon Adelson is out there. He gets to pick the candidates. And then he gets to put his money behind them and see if he can't get those offices, the senators, the White House.
Right.
This is just crazy.
It's madness,
You know, it's madness and it's scary.
Yeah. I mean, look, when I gave the Obama PAC $1 million in 2012, I did it because, you know, I wanted to show that we got to get in the game. It's on the $1 million level now. And unfortunately, since then, every Democratic candidate in the world is always hitting me up for money, you know. And I tell them, it's I'm in BuzzFeed today. There's a headline that says, Hillary has my vote, but not the $1 million, you know. However, there is one candidate who, if they got the nomination, He said if they got the nomination. I'm not made out of money, and I might have to take a job as an Uber driver. But if you choose to run and you are the candidate, I will find a way to give you $1 million. So does that change your thinking at all?
I'm not running for president. But I do want to say this when we talk about money. I get it about money, and I get it about what's happening with Citizens United, but there's another half to this, and that is, on the other side, we may not have the money, but we have our voices. And if we get out there and get organized and use our voices, I truly believe in grassroots. I believe in what we can do by linking up together. I believe in the power of what we can do to build a country together, one that works not just for the top 1% or even the top 10%, but a country that works for all of us. That's what it's got to be about. Our country's on the line, our democracy's on the line, our future's on the line. We got to use our voices.
So if Senator Elizabeth Warren isn't running for president, and I tend to believe her, and that she's not, especially now that Hillary Clinton has announced, it sounds like she may run for president one day, and she's talking more about organizing and creating a grassroots organization. Or I don't know if she's actually going to do that. She's on a book tour, so I guess she's trying to sell books. But she is a candidate I think I would be more excited about than Hillary Clinton. Although I think my view is somewhat like Bill Maher's in that I'll probably end up voting for Hillary Clinton, given the Republican alternatives. but I don't know whether I'll give her money or put effort into her nomination the way I did for Barack Obama. You know, I donated to Barack Obama's campaign in February 2007, so that would have been 2 months ago in this election cycle if I were donating to a candidate. But anyway, on the topic of whether she should have primary opponents, if someone should run against Hillary Clinton, that's one of the questions that Dana Bash asked Senator Barbara Boxer from California over on CNN State of the Union this morning. And I think this is actually the clip where Dana Bash mentions that Lincoln Chafee from Rhode Island might actually run for the Democratic nomination in 2016. And you can see Barbara Boxer gives it kind of the best spin and says she doesn't really need opponents. Hillary Clinton shows how united the party is around her, and I'll talk about that a little more if you see that clip here.
You mentioned the fact that you don't buy the idea that she needs a Democratic primary fight. There will be some opponents on the left, maybe nominal, maybe more. We'll see how it plays out. Lincoln Chafee is somebody who says that he's more than likely to get in and run against her. I talked to him this morning. Is it worth it? Do these guys have a chance? Should they even bother?
Oh, I think anyone that has in their heart the desire to run for president should do it. But what I'm saying is, as a party, we've never been as unified around a candidate. And the reason is, Hillary is so ready for this. You know, they had that pack, ready for Hillary. I'm so over ready. I cannot wait to see this announcement this afternoon. I've worked with her very, very closely when she was First Lady, when she was in the United States Senate. And I'll tell you, the respect that she had across the party aisle, now they forget about it. They loved Hillary. Lindsey Graham loved Hillary. John McCain loved Hillary. They worked with her. She was front and center with Chuck Schumer after 9/11, and she restored hope to that great state and also to our great nation. She fought for those first responders, and they all helped her. And they all, as I remember, voted for her for Secretary of State. Now, all of a sudden, she's this great enemy. It's not going to work for them. They have nothing positive to say.
Well, we'll see.
And I think she has everything positive to say.
Well, Senator, we're going to see about that because I'm going to talk to Lindsey Graham after the break. You're right. He did have some nice things to say about him.
And I'm going to show that clip from Senator Lindsey Graham next. Did you see how they had that little box there waiting for announcement from Hillary Clinton? That was on CNN all morning before, because I guess they originally thought she was going to announce around noon Eastern time, and she ended up announcing more like 3 o'clock Eastern time. So they were on Hillary watch for quite a while, and they had that little box in the corner that I thought was kind of amusing. And as to Senator Barbara Boxer's argument there that the Democratic Party is united around Hillary Clinton, to some extent that's true, although one clip I didn't pick out, I think was from NBC's Meet the Press. Chuck Todd talked about some of their polls. I think that may be the source because, like I said, I don't have the clip, but he talked about over 70% of Democrats want Hillary Clinton to have a primary opponent. And so I think that kind of is contradictory to what Senator Barbara Boxer said about the party being united around Hillary Clinton. But the next clip I want to show is Senator Lindsey Graham trying to respond to what Barbara Boxer said there about how he used to love Hillary when she was in the Senate with him. And it actually starts with a clip of Barack Obama's statement on his Caribbean trip. I think he was in Panama City when he made this statement, and this is yesterday, so it was before Hillary Clinton announced, but he came pretty near to endorsing her, said a lot of positive things about her, and Dana Bash calls it a near endorsement, and then asks Lindsey Graham to respond to Barbara Boxer's comments over in this clip.
She was a formidable candidate in 2008. She was a great supporter of mine in the general election. She was an outstanding Secretary of State. She is my friend. I think she would be an excellent president. And I'm not on the ballot.
A full circle moment as President Obama, who defeated Hillary Clinton in her first presidential run, all but endorsing her bid to succeed him. Joining me now, a man considering a White House run of his own, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. Senator, thank you for joining me. I want to start with where I left off with Senator Boxer, her reminding us that you worked with Hillary Clinton in the Senate. You have praised her when she was Secretary of State. She fought for your ideas inside the Obama Oval Office, for example, arming the Syrian rebels. So would she make a good president?
I think she would continue the policies of this president because she was his Secretary of State. And trust me, she did not fight effectively for a foreign policy that's working. She empowered a failed foreign policy. And when it comes to Obamacare, Bill and Hillary Clinton did a better job of selling it than Barack Obama. So at the end of the day, here's her challenge. Here's how I'm different than Barack Obama. Here's why my foreign policy will be better than his, because the world is literally on fire. And from an economic point of view, here's what I would do differently than Barack Obama. So if she can make a case that she's different than him, then she'll have a chance. If she can't, game, set, match.
Well,
so, I don't know. That didn't seem like a really strong argument against Hillary Clinton from someone who's supposedly running for president on the Republican side, Lindsey Graham, and I've seen Lindsey Graham be a lot more biting than that, so I guess he wasn't having his best day in terms of making strong partisan attacks, or maybe he really does like Hillary Clinton a little bit. It seems her foreign policy is a little more to the right of some of the people who I'd be more comfortable supporting. Anyway, that's about half the clips I want to show on Hillary Clinton, and to get to the next 6, I think I just showed 6, and to get to the next 6, the next 2 of the next 6 I want to show are both background reports. Usually I would have put these at the beginning of the topic because they're overviews of Hillary Clinton, her background, but I guess I wanted to start with the comedy clips, and then a couple of those other clips sort of flowed out of that. And so I'm going to show first ABC and then NBC giving an overview of the career of Hillary Clinton and her decision to run for president in 2016. First, the ABC story from Cecelia Vega, who I believe was reporting from Brooklyn, where she just got her campaign office in this clip.
George, good morning to you. A beautiful morning out here in Brooklyn, and that campaign is already in full swing mode. But let me tell you about what this announcement is going to look like today, now just a few hours away. You know, these big political rallies that we've seen from candidates in the past, you're not going to see the balloons, you're not going to see the signs, the supporters from Hillary Clinton today. What you're going to see is an announcement on social media, probably on Twitter. We also know that there will be a video, which she has already filmed. Announcement today. Hillary Clinton will then head to Iowa, where we understand she's going to be meeting with voters, but they're going to be small meetings, what's being called one-on-one sessions, these kind of private discussions. Her supporters are ready for this fight. They are already out there rallying. We saw a rally here in New York City yesterday called the Ready for Hillary rally, and they are ready to kick off this race. George, this is a really well-oiled machine, and they say they are intent on not repeating the mistakes of the past.
Hey, one of those mistakes in past campaigns.
So that was sort of the briefer report on what's going on with the Hillary Clinton campaign for president in 2016. She was reporting from Brooklyn, where they've opened this campaign office. But over on NBC's Meet the Press, Chuck Todd gave a much longer background on the Clintons, going all the way back to even before she was First Lady. And I want to show that longer background report and talk about the way it summarized Hillary Clinton a little after you see it here.
Let's take a look at the beginning of a campaign in which Hillary Clinton's biggest opponent may very well be Hillary Clinton.
I am in. I'm in to win.
I'm in to win.
I'm running for president, and I'm in it to win it.
On social media today and in Iowa this week, Clinton will attempt to do what she failed to do 8 years ago, go small.
She launched as Clinton Inc. It was a juggernaut suffused with presumptions of inevitability and entitlement, and it was the wrong approach. Humility is the order of the day.
8 years ago, Clinton toured Iowa by air.
I'm having a great time on the helicopter.
And dismissed early state activists.
You know my my sense of caucus states, they are primarily dominated by activists. They don't represent the electorate.
This time she'll stop in Iowa living rooms. The model, say Clinton advisors, her 2000 campaign for Senate in New York, where she reintroduced herself with a listening tour.
Mrs. Clinton, she became an effective candidate when voters felt they were connecting with her authentic self, when they felt she was really speaking from her heart and from her gut and not from talking points.
I just don't want to see us fall backwards. No.
Hillary Clinton's challenge is not all that different from sitting vice presidents, like George H.W. Bush in 1987 or Al Gore in 1999. How to create a first impression again.
I am all about new beginnings. Another new hairstyle, a new email account.
But can a candidate who's been in the public eye for more than 2 decades really reinvent herself? And can she do what Ted Kennedy could not do 3 decades ago? Articulate a compelling message.
Why do you want to be president?
Well, I'm
One of my complaints for this year or two of Ready for Hillary emails is that it wasn't clear what you were ready for.
Clinton advisors say her campaign will center on boosting economic security for working families and casting Clinton as a tenacious fighter able to get results.
I anticipate that she's going to begin the campaign with an actual, genuine, big idea that's really going to focus specifically on the middle class.
As Clinton tries to prove inevitable does not mean she's taking anything for granted.
Well, I hope that clip from Chris Lehane at the end there is correct, that Hillary Clinton is going to have some big idea, something other than inevitability to recommend her for the presidency. I mean, she definitely has lots of good experience. As I've said on my broadcasts over many weeks when this topic has come up, I am skeptical about her foreign policy possibly being too far to the right. I think there was even some talk of Senator Rand Paul being to the left of Hillary Clinton on foreign policy in a lot of ways. And the next clip I'm going to show is actually from Rand Paul. But what Rand Paul is talking about is actually the history of the Clintons that I thought that NBC clip went into in a lot of depth to prepare you for this clip of, also from NBC's Meet the Press. Chuck Todd asked Rand Paul if his delving into the history of the Clintons was unfair, given that he was unwilling to talk about his history, like on the campaign with his father, Ron Paul, and some of his more libertarian beliefs and flip-flops on that. And I'll show you how Rand Paul just turned that into an opportunity to bring up his talking points attacking Hillary Clinton, which are pretty harsh, and call her anti-woman of all things over in this clip.
Clinton's getting into this race. You have been comfortable bringing up a lot of her past, a lot of Bill Clinton's past, and saying that it should be thought about and debated. You're hesitant about your past. You don't like your associations with your father being a part of your campaign.
Right.
Isn't that a little hypocritical?
I think the thing is about the Clintons is that there's a certain sense that they think they're above the law. And I think there's also this grand hypocrisy for the Clintons in the sense that we've got this whole thing, this war on women thing that they like to talk about, and yet Hillary Clinton has taken money from countries that rape victims are publicly lashed. In Saudi Arabia, a woman was gang raped by 7 men. She was publicly lashed 90 times, and then she was convicted of being in the car with an unmarried man. We should be boycotting, voluntarily boycotting a country, not buying stuff from a country that does that to women.
So you want to boycott? So if you're president, Saudi Arabia, you're no longer an ally.
Well,
you're done.
I think that's a little different than what I'm saying. I'm talking about, remember with South Africa, you know, there was much of it that was voluntary boycott, saying, you know what, personally, you know, I'm going to try to tell my university not to invest in this country because of what they do to women. And see, I think I would expect Hillary Clinton, if she believes in women's rights, she should be calling for a boycott of Saudi Arabia. Instead, she's accepting tens of millions of dollars. And I think it looks unseemly, and there's going to be some explaining she's going to have to come up with.
Now that seemed kind of like a weird switcheroo in the middle of that answer, where he turned it into like, oh, it's got to be private universities who are doing this boycott. I personally am not behind the boycott, but if she was in favor of women's rights, then she would be in favor of this boycott. But of course, then he should be also, since he's in favor of women's rights. There have been some people saying that Rand Paul has a problem with women because he got snitty in interviews with women, and then other people say no, he just does not take well to intense questioning in interviews at all. But anyway, I'm getting off the topic of that. I wanted to finish up this idea of Rand Paul's talking points of Hillary Clinton being anti-woman. I call them talking points because that was his answer to the question about the Clinton history. You can see he basically has the same answer over on CBS's Face the Nation, where Bob Schieffer just gave him this question, Hillary Clinton, she's a woman, isn't she? That was kind of a weird question, I thought, from Bob Schieffer. And you get almost the same answer that Rand Paul gave to Chuck Todd's question, with the same anti-Hillary talking points about Hillary as anti-woman because the Clinton Foundation took donations from Saudi Arabia and Brunei over in this clip.
She is a woman, and she is going to make a strong appeal to women.
I think the problem will be for her with that line is that she's taken money from countries that abuse the rights of women. In Saudi Arabia, a woman was raped by 7 men. The woman was then publicly whipped, and then she was arrested for being in the car with an unmarried man. I think we should be boycotting that activity, not encouraging it. And it looks really bad for the case of defending women's rights if you're accepting money. She accepted money from Brunei also, where they stone women to death for adultery. I doubt they stone men because women aren't allowed to make accusations. Women aren't on the juries. Women don't vote. And so it's going to be hard for her to say she's for women's rights when she's accepting money from sort of Stone Age sort of regimes that really abuse the rights of women.
So again, I think that is a little bit harsh on Hillary Clinton. Not that I'm her biggest supporter, but I mean, the Clinton Foundation, the reason we know about it is because they gave out who all the donors were, and I guess it's fairly transparent. I'm not so worried about donations to the Clinton Foundation from Saudi Arabia and Brunei, and I want to show a clip, sort of a retort that was also on CBS's Face the Nation. This is Senator Amy Klobuchar, who, as you might expect, is more of a fan of Hillary Clinton's than Rand Paul. And since she was on later in the program, she responded to what Senator Rand Paul said over in this clip.
Going to college.
Let me just ask you about this. You heard Rand Paul say that here she is holding herself out to be a champion of women, and she's taking money in her foundation from Saudi Arabia.
Well, I think that those contributions to the foundation are open for everyone to look at, and I'm sure that for years now we've seen Hillary Clinton being attacked for various things, but I think the focus is today she's going to start being able to make her case to the people of this country in small groups, in a warm setting where she excels. Because I saw her as a senator and one-to-one on those bread and butter issues, and that's all I hear about in Minnesota, the Farm Bill. Those guys that just announced on the Republican side, they didn't even vote for it. Well, she's going to go to Iowa and talk about rural policy, things that matter to the people of this country.
Well, what if they say out there, you ought to give those contributions back, Senator, because it leaves sort of an air of hypocrisy about this whole thing. What would you tell her to answer?
I think she's answered this. She's talked about that this was the foundation. I think you've seen other foundations take similar contributions. But the point of it is this. I don't think anyone can quite match her record for promoting women's rights all across the world. And if they want to go on that plane and have that argument, I'll say she wins.
So that seemed like a fairly easy way to retort to the Rand Paul argument that he made both on CBS's Face the Nation and also over on NBC's Meet the Press. And the last clip I want to show on the Hillary Clinton announcement that she's running for president actually comes from Secretary of State John Kerry. He was on several shows, just like Senator Rand Paul was on several shows, and he was asked, about what he thought about Hillary Clinton running for president, and he wouldn't take a position because he's supposed to be nonpartisan, and I'm not going to show him not taking a position. But I will show his answer to the issue of the Hillary Clinton email scandal, since he's now Secretary of State, and over on CBS's Face the Nation, Bob Schieffer asked him Hillary Clinton had turned over all the emails. And you'll notice his answer is kind of a dodge. He talks about what the State Department's going to release, not what Hillary Clinton turned over, and then that there's this Inspector General doing an overall review of how the State Department handles employee emails, but again, nothing about Hillary Clinton and her email scandal over in this final clip on the Hillary Clinton running for president segment of the show here.
Hillary Clinton's going to announce later today that she is going to run for president. The big controversy over the emails. Are you confident that she has turned over all of the emails that were relevant to her role as Secretary of State?
Well, the State Department is currently in a process of review of those emails. It'll take a matter of months. I think about a month has gone by, so there are a couple of more. But we will release all the emails that are appropriate based on classification. We're obviously looking through them to determine that no classified information is inadvertently released, but those emails will be released at the appropriate moment. And I've also asked the Inspector General of the State Department to evaluate all of the methodology of the management of emails here in the department so that we get ahead of the curve and figure out if every procedure that we're in place is appropriate. And as for myself, I deal with a state.gov address, and all of my emails are being secured by the State Department.
All right. Well, Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Bob. And again, congratulations.
Oh yeah, that congratulations at the end is because Bob Schieffer announced that sometime this summer he's retiring. He's worked at CBS News for 46 years. He's been the host of Face the Nation for not all of that time, I'm not sure how long, because I actually used to listen to different hosts when Face the Nation was on the radio, simulcast on the radio a while back, and I remember Bob Schieffer didn't used to be the host like 20 years ago. But anyway, like I said, that's the last clip on the Hillary Clinton's running for president segment of the show. I now want to show 5 fairly quick clips. Well, 3 of them are Secretary of State John Kerry, and he never has a quick answer to anything, I guess. But the first 3, this is on the topic of Iran. They're sort of follow-ups from the big announcement last week, or that I discussed in many more clips last week, of the framework agreement for stopping Iran's nuclear program and ending sanctions against Iran. And one of the things that developed this last week was differences between the way the United States has described the deal and the way Iran has described the deal. And over on NBC's Meet the Press, Chuck Todd asked this question. It was actually, I think, all 3 of the shows he was on, he got asked the same question, but I'm not going to make you watch him answer it over and over again. This is just one version of the question, because I thought NBC's Meet the Press put up a good chart showing the differences between how the United States is describing the deal and Iran is describing the deal over in this clip.
There are plenty of people that say if what you say the agreement is the agreement. There are plenty of people, even if some Republicans, who say it's a good agreement. However, the leader of Iran, the Ayatollah, and everybody knows this is the guy that calls the shots. He tweets this out in English: "I trust our negotiators, but I'm really worried as the other side is into lying and breaching promises." An example was the White House fact sheet. And when you look at the differences, whether it's President Rouhani and what he has said or what the Ayatollah has said, the United States has said there's going to be a gradual relief of sanctions based on progress. The Iranians say there's immediate sanction relief. The U.S. says there's limits on uranium enrichment. The Iranians say there's no mention of enrichment limits. The U.S. says there's restrictions on Iranian research. The Iranians say there is no restrictions on research and development. Why are they publicly lying if that's what they're doing?
Well, I'm not going to get into accusations back and forth. That doesn't help our process. It's not going to solve any problem.
Are they being truthful? Are the Iranians truthful here?
Let me just say this to you, Chuck. They're going to say the things that they feel they need to say with respect to their deal at home. And all I can tell you is this. When we did the interim agreement, there were these same kinds of discrepancies, or spin, if you want to call it that, with respect to what the deal was or wasn't. But in the end, The deal was signed, and the deal has been agreed to and lived up to. No one contests that Iran has lived up to every component of that agreement, and the deal is what we said it was. Now, with respect to the fact sheet that we put out just yesterday, the Russians released a statement saying that the statement released by the United States is both reliable and factual. So I will stand by every word that I have uttered publicly, and I will be briefing the United States Congress in full, the House tomorrow, the Senate the next day, and we will lay out all of the details to them, some of which are obviously classified, but we will have a long discussion about what the facts are.
But if
So that was kind of a long-winded answer from Secretary of State John Kerry, but I thought it was important to see how he responded to the discrepancies between how the United States describes the deal and Iran. He's saying what they say in Iran may be for domestic consumption, I guess, if you sort of read between the lines of what he said, and that the proof will be in the final deal. And he said there was some similar discrepancies in the interim deal, but that was how they asked that question on NBC's Meet the Press, and that same question was over on CBS and ABC as well. But over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos asked Secretary of State John Kerry the question with an added wrinkle of this comment that Senator John McCain made, I guess on some radio program, where he basically took the side of the Iranian Ayatollah and said that what this means is that John McCain said what this means is John Kerry is trying to sell us a bill of goods, that he's lying to the Congress and the American people, that the real terms of the deal are what the leaders of Iran are saying. And you can see how Secretary of State John Kerry responded to that accusation. Like I said, this is ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning here in this clip.
When you go up to Capitol Hill, you'll probably encounter your old friend and colleague, Senator John McCain, who seems to be suggesting that the Ayatollah has his interpretation right. He calls you, quote, delusional. And he went on to say this.
I can't blame the Ayatollah because I don't think they ever agreed to it. And I think John Kerry tried to come back and sell a bill of goods, hoping maybe that the Iranians wouldn't say much about it.
Selling us a bill of goods?
I think President Obama spoke very, very powerfully to Senator McCain yesterday, and I'll let the president's words stand. I also stand by every fact that I have laid out. It's an unusual affirmation of our facts to come from Russia, but Russia has said that what we've set out is reliable and accurate, and I will let the final agreement speak for itself.
As you know, your predecessor, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, announcing for president.
So, yeah, that's the answer that Secretary of State John Kerry gave on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. He said he'd let the deal speak for itself, but he also referred to what President Obama said, defending him against what Senator John McCain said. And over on CBS's Face the Nation, Bob Schieffer asks sort of the same question, but he included the clip of President Obama defending Secretary of State John Kerry against these John McCain accusations, where President Obama basically, he specifically says, why is there a U.S. Senator believing the Ayatollah over, a decorated Vietnam veteran, Secretary of State John Kerry? And you can see John Kerry kind of likes being defended by the president that way, and then he gives basically the same answer, I guess, over in this clip.
Supreme leader said no nuclear deal unless all sanctions are lifted. There will be no inspection of military sites. But according to the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, John McCain, a longtime colleague of yours, he said that the Ayatollah's comments were not what you had been talking about. And here's what he said in a radio talk show interview.
John Kerry must have known what was in it and yet chose to interpret it in another way. It's probably in black and white that the Ayatollah is probably right. John Kerry is delusional.
And then last night, the president shot back pretty hard at John McCain.
And when I hear some, like Senator McCain recently, suggest that our Secretary of State, John Kerry, who served in the United States Senate, a Vietnam veteran, who's provided exemplary service to this nation, is somehow less trustworthy in the interpretation of what's in a political agreement than the supreme leader of Iran, that's an indication of the degree to which partisanship has crossed all boundaries.
So there you have it, Mr. Secretary. What do you agree with what the president said? Do you go that far?
Well, Bob, I'm going to answer your question, but let me just begin by publicly congratulating you on 46 extraordinary years, and it's a pleasure to be on with you, and really an amazing career. With respect to the question you just raised, I think the president has spoken very powerfully to Senator McCain's comments and belief in the Ayatollah's interpretation. I'll let the facts speak for themselves. Yesterday, the Russians, who are not our usual ally, released a statement saying that what we have put out in terms of our information is both reliable and accurate. And I will be briefing the Congress in depth tomorrow with the House and Tuesday with the Senate. And I'll lay out the facts. Everything I have laid out is a fact, and I'll stand by them. In the end, it's really the final agreement that will determine it. And I would remind you, we had this same dueling narratives, discrepancy, spin, whatever you want to call it, with respect to the interim agreement, Bob. But in the end, the interim agreement came out exactly as we had described. And what's important is Iran not only signed it, but has lived up to it in every respect. Iran has proven that it will join into an agreement and then live by the agreement. And so that's important as we come into the final 2.5 months of negotiation. It's also important to note that we have 2.5 more months to negotiate. So this is not finalized. This is an outline, parameters. And most people are very surprised by the depth and breadth and detail of these parameters. And it went well beyond what they expected. And I think people need to hold their fire, let us negotiate without interference, and be able to complete the job over the course of the next 2.5 months.
Do you?
So, yeah, like I said, a lot of that was the same answer I showed you. I try not to give too much duplication, but I like the way that showing those clips built from the conflict between the U.S. and Iran to John McCain's kind of weird decision to believe the Ayatollah over his Senate colleague, or former Senate colleague, and now Secretary of State John McCain, and then the way Bob Schieffer actually added in the defense from President Obama that pointed out the way John McCain is I was looking in the comments of the people who are watching this as a live show, and I saw someone said that John McCain was off his medication, which I don't know what his deal is, but he did just say he's running for another term in the Senate. I saw a story about that recently, so maybe he's gearing up to make sure he's not challenged on the right, although he's been pretty cranky on President Obama's foreign policy for quite a while. Oh, and speaking of the live comments, once this is a recorded show, I will put a link down in the video description showing you how to find all the sometimes it's over like 1,000 comments that the people who are watching the live show leave. I've been uploading them as an RTF file attached to the Patreon version of this video, which is basically, it's an embed of the recorded version. And so anyway, you can find the live comments there. If you're wondering where they disappeared to, I explained recently that YouTube has decided that getting rid of the live comments, making them disappear, that is not a bug, that is a feature. They did that on purpose, so I'm trying to save them for you, and you'll find that over on my Patreon page. Right now there's a link down to my Patreon page that you can keep this show going, analyzing politics and media through the 2016 election. But before I get to more political clips, I want to show 2 more quick clips on the Iran deal. First, Senator Bob Menendez was on Fox News Sunday exclusively. He was recently indicted, and Chris Wallace only asked him one question about that. Even though he's a Democrat, he's kind of a darling of the Republicans at the moment because he's been very critical of President Obama's policy on Cuba and Iran. And so Chris Wallace asked him this one question about the indictment and then mostly talked to him about Cuba and Iran and let him critique President Obama. And this is a clip of him critiquing the Iran deal, which I'll discuss after you see the Fox News clip here.
Let's turn to Iran. And as we've said, you have been a very tough critic of President Obama's efforts to negotiate a nuclear deal with Iran. And in fact, at one point, you said administration arguments sounded like your words, talking points straight out of Tehran. Here's what Iran's supreme leader said this week about the United States.
The other party who is stubborn, treacherous, and hard to deal with, and is known to be after trickery, after haggling, after stabbing others in the back.
The president, the Ayatollah, says that all sanctions must be lifted right away when the deal is signed, not lifted gradually as Iran complies with the deal. He also says that there can be no inspection of military installations where it is believed that a lot of the work, particularly in weaponization of a nuclear bomb, is going on. When you hear these kinds of comments from the supreme leader, what does it tell you about the framework the president says that he got from the Iranians?
Well, this is my concern. First of all, Chris, we have gone from the national imperative we have had globally to stopping nuclear proliferation to trying to contain or administer it. That is a fundamental change in our global policy. Secondly, many of us, before the framework agreement was announced, said, is this going to be in writing? Because if, in fact, it's not in writing, then you're going to have different interpretations. And sure enough, you have different interpretations. You have different interpretations on sanctions relief. The Iranians shouldn't get a sign-in bonus. Secondly, you have different interpretations about research and development. That's critically important because how far can they advance their research and development? So at some point their breakout could even be shorter. Thirdly, these inspections are incredibly important. They still have not come clean with the International Atomic Energy Administration over their past militarization efforts, weaponizing their nuclear program. So we need to know how far did they get in their weaponization efforts so that we understand not only the breakout time, but how quickly they can weaponize that effort. All of these and many other elements are clearly in dispute. And that's why I do believe that, the legislation that Senator Corker and I have, which is to give Congress a rightful role, particularly a role when it was the one who passed the laws that ultimately provided the sanctions that got Iran to the table, to have a say on whatever a final agreement is.
Okay, so
LiberalViewer presents.
Whoa, sorry about that. I don't know why I replayed the beginning there. Just clicked on the wrong little square there. I apologize for that. Anyway, that I guess goes to show that there are several Democrats, in addition to many Republicans, who are skeptical of this Iran deal. And of course, one of the most skeptical Democrats was featured on Fox News Sunday. I wanted to make sure you saw that. And then the last clip I want to show is how Senator Rand Paul responded to the Iran deal. This is over on NBC's Meet the Press, answering a question from Chuck Todd, where he actually seemed a little less, he was skeptical, but seemed a little more open-minded than people like Bob Menendez or, of course, Lindsey Graham and John McCain. And then I noticed that Rand Paul, when he's feeling like he might be sounding a little weak on foreign policy, he will often go to the Ronald Reagan reference, as he does over in this clip.
Is not saying what it means.
Going back to the description, the agreement as the United States has described it, good enough agreement for you?
I think that there are good things in it. So I'm not one of the Republicans who will say, oh, because the president's a Democrat, I'm never going to say he can do anything good. I believe in negotiations. I want to have negotiations. But I also realize that negotiations have to be from a position of strength.
Right.
Many conservatives who are hopping mad and all they want to do is criticize the president, they don't remember Ronald Reagan's talked with the Russians. We negotiated with the Russians for decades. Didn't mean we trusted them. Reagan said trust but verify. I'm still in the same camp. So while I want a deal, I don't want a bad deal. All I've seen is a fact sheet so far, and I will tell you it greatly troubles me that the Iranians are saying it doesn't mean any of this, and meanwhile the Ayatollah is still spouting off with, aspersions towards the U.S. and Zarif saying it doesn't mean anything. And so really the Iranians are destroying the ability for any Americans to get behind it because of their remarks. So if they could come out and say, yes, we agree with the administration on what it means, there might be a chance for people to look at the agreement objectively.
So, yeah, that sounded almost reasonable, and I guess that's one of the problems Senator Rand Paul's been having since he's running for nomination in the Republican Party. He seems like he is a little bit too far to the left based on his association with his father, Ron Paul, and so he's had to flip-flop on, and backtrack on some of his non-interventionism. That I talked about that several months back when at that time it looked like he was running for president. Now he's actually announced, and I want to show several clips on the Republican presidential campaign, mostly about Rand Paul's announcement this week. First, how Bill Maher covered Rand Paul's stumbles. I sort of referred to that. He had some difficult interviews, especially with female reporters, and having problems with flip-flopping on issues, as Bill Maher covered in his monologue on Friday on HBO in this clip.
The other candidate who threw his hat in the ring this week, of course, is Rand Paul. Kind of hit the ground sucking. Yeah, he kind of did. I mean, he was supposed to be the one guy who was for cutting defense. That's why I liked him. And now he's standing in front of an aircraft carrier. And they asked him on NBC News why he was flip-flopping on all the issues he used to be good on. And he had an interesting answer. He said, well, when I was young, I experimented with integrity. No, you know what he was when he was, what he did before he went into politics, Rand Paul? He was an eye doctor. He was an ophthalmologist, which that training has come in handy because every time he switches positions, he says, better like this or better like this?
I really like that joke. I thought that was pretty funny. Because I wear glasses, and I have for quite a while, so I've spent a lot of time with the optometrist. He was an ophthalmologist, but I guess it's really the optometrist who mainly does that. Well, I guess an ophthalmologist might do it, but anyway, I thought that was a funny joke, and but the premise there about Rand Paul possibly having to flip-flop because he's been too far to the left and too democratic, too much like a Democrat to run in a Republican primary, which isn't exactly true. He's had some very conservative positions as well, but there's enough truth to it that Bob Schieffer over on CBS's Face the Nation asked him specifically about him seeming almost like a Democrat over in this clip.
Let's talk about your campaign. You have been reaching out to black voters, to millennials. You have said that the 1.1 million immigrants in this country already here should have some legal status and pay taxes. If I didn't know better, and I do know better, I would think you might be a Democrat. Do you really think you can get the Republican nomination making those statements and taking those positions?
Well, you add that to the fact that I'm also one of the most conservative members of the Senate in the sense that I vote against spending, I vote against unbalanced budgets, I'm a proponent of lower taxes. So all of those are right within the mainstream of the party. But I do have some additional things. I call them sometimes the libertarian-ish kind of issues of believing in privacy, believing in criminal justice, that everyone should be treated fairly under the law no matter the color of your skin. We still have a large problem in our country that if you are black, you're not always being treated fairly under the law, and I want to fix that.
I did say 1.1 million. I think I meant 11 million immigrants, but you want to find some sort of legal status for them.
What I want to do is first secure the border. If we secure the border and we can say we know who's coming, who's going, and only people come legally, the 11 million that are here, I think there could be a work status for them. And I think what I've tried to say is what we want is more legal immigration so we have less illegal immigration. But I am open to immigration reform. I voted against the bill that came forward, though, primarily because it limited the number of legal work visas.
So I don't know if you can square that circle, if you can get to the position he's trying to take in the Republican primary from the position he had before, but I don't know. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I want to show a couple more clips of Rand Paul trying to come up with his current position compared to his past position on foreign policy. These are the last two clips from Senator Rand Paul's. I think he went to 3 different shows this morning. I hope I have that right. These are 2 from NBC's Meet the Press. Chuck Todd first asked him about some things he'd said about it basically not being worth American lives to fight for complicated sides that sort of flip around in the Middle East. And one thing I like about his answer, he does seem to try to move to the left of Hillary Clinton in this answer. I think he mentions Hillary's war in Libya, as you can see over here.
There's a quote you gave. It was a New Yorker. You said it in July of last year, but it was in the October New Yorker. You said this: when you have so many confusions, how can you ask an American GI to go fight and lose his life for something where we'd be fighting with the Iranians and the Syrians against ISIS, but in the neighboring country we would be fighting with many people who hate Israel, hate the United States, hate Christianity? Makes absolutely no sense. I take that quote to think that you think even right now the U.S.'s presence in the Middle East is too big.
Well, I don't think I'd put it that way. I would say that the quote is to mean that the Middle East is a very confusing place, and before we put GIs into something where they could lose their lives or where we're putting American GI lives at risk, that we have to think before we act. And I think if I can think of one thing that is true in that mess that I think is incontrovertible and really hard for anybody to object to, is that every time we've toppled a strong man, we've gotten chaos and we've gotten the rise of radical Islam. But that includes wars that were promoted by Republicans as well as wars promoted by Democrats. I think Hillary's war in Libya is an example, but I also think the toppling of Hussein's another example of when a strong man went, chaos ensued.
So yeah, that's Senator Rand Paul trying to talk about Hillary's war in Libya and equating it with George W. Bush's war in Iraq. And of course, Hillary Clinton lost to Barack Obama because she voted for George W. Bush's war in Iraq, or voted to authorize the use of force at least. And I'm not going to show any clips about that issue, but I want to show one more clip from Rand Paul. Like I said, this is also from NBC's Meet the Press. Chuck Todd asked him an interesting question about separating himself from his father, Ron Paul. Because he was first talking about this. I'm going to show the tail end of Senator Rand Paul's answer to a previous question that Chuck Todd had asked about whether Ron Paul's loss in the Republican primary meant oblivion for the Republican Party, which is something Rand Paul said in 2012 at one point. And he sort of distanced himself from that, said that was like rhetoric. And then Chuck Todd tried to get him to specifically disagree with his father, and he seemed a little testy about that. But then you can see the complete answer over here.
I was a great fan of my dad. I think he's one of the few honest and genuine people in politics. So I do mean that in my support. But I think also when we say it's our guy or oblivion, we may sometimes be using a little rhetorical flourish.
Where do you disagree with your dad? What are three? Give me three areas.
You go first. Where do you disagree with your dad? And then I'll go to mine. Here's the thing.
But you guys are both elected officials.
Yeah, I know.
It is, and your campaign. There are a lot of Ron Paul fans that showed up today.
I would say the best way to describe it has to be sort of in general terms, unless we've got a few hours, you know. And the thing is that I would say that we both believe in the original intent of the Constitution. We both believe that government should spend only that comes in. We both believe in a strong national defense, and we both believe that maybe in the spectrum of foreign policy that maybe we've intervened too much. Now, there's degrees of how much you intervene around the world, and he might be a little bit more towards the side of not ever intervening, and I'm towards the side of deciding how we intervene through Congress and doing it when there is a vital American interest involved. And so I think there are times to intervene. I think ISIS is one of those.
So if you like that previous clip I showed where he was talking about being non-interventionist in the Middle East because it wasn't worth fighting on one side and then on the other, in that last clip you see, he specifically cites ISIS as the place that he wants us to use military force, and he differentiates himself from his father, Ron Paul, on that point. So I don't know, that's like the place where we're most likely to be playing one side, fighting on the side of Iran and against the side of, Assad in Syria, and, the whole flip around that he said we shouldn't be doing. And yet that's the place where he decides he wants to be interventionist. So I don't know exactly what to make of that. You can let me know what you think. I have one more clip, not from Rand Paul, but on the Republican nomination process. This is from like the most powerful Tea Party senator in the Senate who isn't running for president. Senator Mike Lee was over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, talking about his new book. I can't remember the exact name, but it's like Who Stole the Constitution, or The Loss of the Constitution, and I have no idea. Somehow, as someone who believes strongly in protecting the Constitution, I don't know if I agree with what that's about. A lot. I remember one clip I'm not going to show is him talking about how he wants all administrative regulations to have to be voted on by Congress, which, at least based on the productivity of recent Congresses, seemed like a really bad idea to me. But here he is talking about his 3 Tea Party colleagues, or 3 Senate colleagues who are running for president, Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio, and comparing them, which I thought was kind of interesting. It's only about a minute from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning here.
All 3 of them. Just give me one thing that people need to know about each candidate quickly. Rand Paul.
Rand Paul is a lifelong devotee of limited government. He understands the risks that accompany too much government intervention. He has the ability to expand the tent of the party.
Ted Cruz?
Ted Cruz is passionate. He memorized the Constitution when he was about 6 months old. You will not find a more impassioned advocate for constitutionally limited government than Ted Cruz. And he brings a lot of people into the fold because of his passion for this issue.
And finally, Marco Rubio.
Marco Rubio can speak in a way that conjures up emotion and a great love for our country. And he brings to the table a degree of natural political talent that is truly remarkable.
All 3 of them are going to want you.
So that's how Senator Mike Lee describes 3 guys who he likes, I guess all of them, and differentiates between the 3 of them. I don't know why I was having a problem with that word. But I thought it was an interesting way to differentiate between the 2 announced Republican candidates and then the 3rd one who they say is going to announce on Tuesday, Senator Marco Rubio. I guess if you're a Republican in the voting in the primaries, you probably look at them a lot like Senator Mike Lee describes them, which is not the way I look at them, so I find it interesting to hear someone talk about them that way. So now I want to move on to the next topic, which is race and police officers and the criminal justice system. This seems to come up again and again because these unarmed black men keep getting shot or killed various different ways all across the country. I made a video a couple months back giving a lot of background on this. There's a link down in the video description to, it's called Cops, Justice System, Racist, Classist, or Both. And if you're watching this as a recorded show, you should be able to just click on a link right here if you didn't see that. It's about 18 minutes long, and I use a bunch of clips from the 2 books you can see right here. The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, talking about how the criminal justice system is a system of racial control. And then Matt Taibbi's The Divide, talking about how there's a different criminal justice system for the rich and for the very poor, and then the middle class generally doesn't really get involved in it. But anyway, the big story this last week was this 50-year-old unarmed black man getting shot in the back, and a video of it surfaced. This is from North Charleston, South Carolina. And first I'm going to show kind of dark humor from Bill Maher in his monologue, talking about you know, how unsurprising it is. And there's a kind of funny probable cause joke, even though it's definitely a really sad situation. But I'll show that first over in this clip.
Yes, in the category of things I never thought I would see, the police this week admitted they got one wrong. First time I'd ever seen them do that. Now, we've all seen this video, right, from South Carolina. What happened was a black man was driving a Mercedes, or what the police call probable cause. So the cop pulls him over. Then the guy was late with his child support payment, so he panicked and ran away, and the cop shot him in the back 8 times. And then, of course, the cop claims that, like they always do, that his life was in danger. This was the worst excuse in the world. The cop said, I had to shoot him. I thought he was charging at me backwards while shrinking. That's a terrible excuse.
Yeah, like I said, as sad as the story is, I thought that probable cause joke about, you know, black man and Mercedes being probable cause was kind of funny. And then he was running at me backwards while shrinking. I mean, it just, the whole thing is so ridiculous. But without the video, as I'll show an interesting clip on that in a minute about how the video made all the difference. But first, before I get to how NBC's Meet the Press showed that topic or that subtopic, you know, on how the video changed things, I want to show 2 interesting reports from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. First, sort of on the local story in North Charleston, South Carolina. The reporter on this, who is in the town locally, talking about the families and what was happening. Let me make sure I get the name right here. Oh yeah, this is Steve Osumsami reporting the local story over here.
Good morning to you, George. This morning, one family is waking up having just buried a son, and another is hoping their son will regain his freedom. At Walter Scott's funeral yesterday, his family said they aren't sure if race played a role in his killing, caught in this cell phone video seen round the world of North Charleston police officer Michael Slager shooting Scott as he runs away. Scott's family says it looks like an execution. In police reports, Officer Slager said he thought Scott was going for his stun gun and feared for his safety. His lawyers say they will be conducting their own investigation. But now, state police say they were suspicious of Slager's account from the start. Police have also interviewed the unidentified passenger who was in Scott's car during the traffic stop that began this, but did not see the shooting. We're told he doesn't want to speak publicly. To ease concerns here, North Charleston police are buying body cameras for every single officer on their police force. It is not lost on anyone here that the narrative of this shooting would have been entirely different if it weren't for that cell phone video. George.
So Steve Osumsami in that report mentioned that the narrative, everything would have been very different if there hadn't have been the video. And I'm going to show a clip from Meet the Press that really brought that home as the clip after next. But the next clip I want to show is also from ABC's This Week. This is reporter Pierre Thomas, their, I think, senior justice correspondent is his title. And he gives a really good overview and puts it in the context of these other shootings of unarmed black men over in this clip.
The FBI has launched an investigation that will dissect every aspect of the killing of Walter Scott, frame by frame. But the critical question they must resolve is why. Why did the officer fire those shots in Scott's back? Did he have a legitimate reason to fear for his safety or that of others? And why did this routine traffic stop escalate and turn into a deadly confrontation? Questions that have emerged time and time again recently as controversial police encounters with minorities caught on tape are shown in stark detail. July 2014, Eric Garner choked after being confronted for allegedly selling cigarettes illegally. September 2014, a black man pulled over in South Carolina for a seatbelt violation, shot repeatedly after reaching for his license.
Why did you shoot me?
And watch what happens to this family in Indiana during another traffic stop. Window smashed, father tased.
it does make us back up and does make us wonder what is going on in our environment as it relates to men of color and police officers across this country.
Cedric Alexander serves on a recently formed presidential task force that has called for a number of changes, including increased community policing, better use of technology, and improved training and education.
We have to better train police officers, and we all have to be very much also very conscious of what our implicit and explicit biases may happen to be.
Critics of police say those biases may account for more force used against minorities. While there's no complete data on officer-related violence, one group estimated that while African Americans make up only 14% of the population, they were 40% of unarmed deaths at the hands of police in 2014. Coming on the heels of Ferguson, with more violent encounters between police and minorities now caught on tape, law enforcement and civil rights leaders say we now stand at a critical moment.
So yeah, like I said, I thought that report from Pierre Thomas on ABC was really thorough in putting it into the context of all these other shootings of unarmed black men, and showed some really compelling video, and then also picking out that statistic, which it's kind of sad that we don't really know how many unarmed black men are being killed. I've seen, there's this 2012 data here, just like it's in the range of between 100 and 200, and then I've heard like 900, and it's because we don't actually keep those statistics, and they're voluntary, and they're really no way to find out. But 40%, I don't know where that figure came from. I wish they had said. That's one criticism I'd have of the Pierre Thomas report, is they didn't actually tell you where that statistic came from. And like I said, that was a really good straight news report, and now I want to show a sort of more creative way of looking at the topic of what would have happened if the video hadn't been found. Over on NBC's Meet the Press, Chuck Todd showed this piece, and they never said who narrated it, so I can't tell you who the narrator is of this piece, but it's introduced by Chuck Todd, where they give a shout out or a hat tip to the Huffington Post, where apparently they wrote an article that I didn't see about how this would have been reported if there hadn't been a video. And over on NBC's Meet the Press, they talk about how this would have been reported on the news, how TV news would have had to report the story if there hadn't have been the videotape of this man, Walter Scott, being shot in the back by the police. And you can see that report over here.
This week, the folks over at the Huffington Post wrote a print version of how the North Charleston encounter would have been covered had there been no tape of the incident. So we thought we'd try to do a television version of what they did, how TV would have been stuck covering the story with no video to contradict the claims of the police department. Here it is. And remember, what you're about to see did not air anywhere. It is simply a version of how television would have had to cover the story if there were no video, and it had to rely entirely on information from the North Charleston Police Department. Every quote in here is real, released in the initial aftermath of the incident.
A routine traffic stop turned deadly Saturday when police say a North Charleston officer was forced to open fire on a driver who tried to overpower him. It began when Officer Michael Slager pulled over 50-year-old Walter Scott for a broken taillight, and Scott suddenly fled the scene. Slager said he pursued Scott, and his lawyer told a local newspaper, when confronted, Officer Slager reached for his taser, as trained by the department, and then a struggle ensued. The driver tried to overpower Officer Slager in an effort to take his taser. Police say Scott was able to gain control of the taser, and that feeling threatened, Slager then reached for his gun and opened fire. Scott was hit and fell to the ground.
Shots fired. Subject is down. He grabbed my taser.
Police say other officers rushed to the scene, delivering first aid and performing CPR. Scott was pronounced dead at the scene. Walter Scott has a long rap sheet that includes charges of assault and battery and failure to pay child support. In a statement, North Charleston Police Chief Eddie Drigger said, "This is part of the job that no one likes and wishes would never happen. This type of situation is unfortunate and difficult for everyone."
Remember everything?
Wow, it's pretty chilling. And what Chuck Todd was pointing out there when I cut him off was that all those quotes are actual quotes. That's not a real news story, but everything in it is things that people actually said, and it's kind of chilling thinking about how this would have been reported if there hadn't have been that video. And you can let me know what you think. I think it's pretty obvious, although there is this clip that I didn't pick out because it's a pundit clip. It's a Brit Hume over on the Fox News Sunday panel. He talked about how it's unknowable if the videotape changed the outcome. And I mean, that's not entirely ridiculous because there was some evidence that might have come out without the video, you know, like all the shots in the back. But there would have been a lot of wrangling over it. And one of the things that was kind of disgusting about the Fox News coverage is they really tried to isolate this incident and say it was like this one-time incident and say this isn't what happened to Michael Brown and Ferguson, you know, because they spent so much time saying, you know, hands up, don't shoot has been somewhat debunked by the Justice Department report because they're conflicting witnesses. But, you know, whether he had his hands up or not doesn't say whether the shooting was justified, especially in terms of a preponderance of the evidence. He may not be prosecutable, but there's still going to be a civil case where we'll find out whether he had to be shot, you know, based on a preponderance of the evidence. And anyway, I don't want to go into the whole Michael Brown shooting, but I did want to show a couple quick clips from the, you know, alternate universe of Fox News where they talked about how, you know, at least they reported on this. It took like an extra day for Fox News to start reporting on this video of Walter Scott being shot in the back. And even then, you know, they talked about how this shows the system's working, and I'll show a clip about that in a minute. But first, here's how they talked about how people on the left were politicizing it. This is just a teaser clip from Fox News Sunday this morning. Chris Wallace over here.
Up next, an unarmed black man killed by a white police officer in South Carolina. But is the case being politicized? Our Sunday group joins the conversation. Plus, what...
Oh, the Sunday group. I think they will show how it can be politicized. And here you can see Chris Wallace doing it in his question to George Will, which kind of meanders around and ends up somewhere in a way that doesn't really answer the question over here.
Perhaps the most explosive story this week, certainly the most surprising, was this video of a white police officer shooting a black man repeatedly in the back. And by the end of the week, Hillary Clinton sent out this tweet: heartbreaking and too familiar. We can do better. Rebuild trust, reform justice system, respect all lives. But Senator Lindsey Graham pushed back.
With all due respect to Hillary Clinton, I think we're proving in South Carolina that our justice system is working.
George, given the fact that the police officer was fired from the force, charged with murder, and is being held without bail, does Lindsey Graham have a point?
He absolutely does. The default position of Eric Holder's Justice Department, from Florida with Trayvon Martin to Ferguson, Missouri, is that racism is so undiminished as a force in American life that local institutions cannot be trusted. What we're seeing is a very interesting phenomenon, how technology, this thing, the smartphone, is changing capabilities, which change expectations, which changes rights at the end of time. We've got an enormous number of litigations all over the country about the right of people to film public officials and the performance of their duties, most especially, of course, policemen who have the lethal force of the state behind them. And this is going to change American life profoundly and for the better.
You know,
I don't know where George Will was going with that answer, but I do know that Fox News has been trying to downplay this caught on video unarmed black man being shot in the back as part of any kind of trend, although you saw over in Pierre Thomas's report on ABC that he put together several videos, and Fox News seemed most concerned about showing that this wasn't like Ferguson. And like I said, I discussed in more detail the whole racial aspect of the criminal justice system in my video that there's a link down to in the video description if you haven't seen it. I hope you take a look at it if you haven't seen it. And so I have one more topic I want to cover. I don't know, people seem to like it when I talk about this, or are more interested in it even though they don't seem to like what I say, or a larger proportion of my viewers don't like when I talk about Islam, apparently, or this whole idea of Islamic extremism and whether you should blame it on the religion of Islam, whether, the whole Bill Maher quote about Islam being the motherlode of bad ideas. I think that people tend to take into religion their cultural and personality and or their cultural biases and their individual personalities, and that religion doesn't really make bad people good or good people bad. I mean, it does have some influence on people, but especially the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, have such a long history and such ambiguous texts and long histories of interpretations going all sorts of different ways that you can basically read into it, the values. There are good values, and there are, aggressive militaristic values in all three of those religions I just mentioned. Anyway, Bill Maher covered the topic again on his show, HBO's Real Time, on Friday, because he had on freed Zakaria, first in a more serious way, sort of directly confronting freed Zakaria about this. And I think Freed made some good points, not all the good points, but a good point about how Bill Maher's approach isn't a really persuasive one for the people who really need to be persuaded over in this clip.
They kept saying that he looked arrogant and he looked indifferent. I think they're misinterpreting that. What he looked to me was confident. Confident because he knew where he was going. Up to paradise.
Sorry, I should explain. The beginning of this clip, Bill Maher is talking about Dzhokhar Tsarnaev and his conviction for the Boston Marathon bombing this last week, which I didn't think was very newsworthy because even his lawyers admitted he was guilty. The newsworthy event will be whether he gets the death penalty or not. But anyway, Bill Maher, in this clip, he starts talking about how people said Dzhokhar Tsarnaev looked confident when he was sitting in the courtroom, or looked arrogant, and anyway, that's the introduction I should have given before you watch that clip, which I started to play here.
They kept saying that he looked arrogant and he looked indifferent. I think they're misinterpreting that. What he looked to me was confident. Confident because he knew where he was going. Up to paradise, which gets us back to the idea of Islam is the motherlode of bad ideas. Fareed.
Well, as you know, Bill, I've written a lot about the problems in Islam. In fact, I wrote about them well before you were talking about it, because I was focused on that stuff. My problem with the way you approach it is, I don't think you're going to reform a religion by telling 1.6 billion people, most of whom are just devout people who get some inspiration from that religion and go about their daily lives. I don't think you're going to change the religion by saying, your religion is the motherlode of bad ideas, it's a terrible thing, shape it up and change it. I think, frankly, you're going to make a lot of news for yourself, and you're going to get a lot of applause lines and joke lines out of it. But if you really want to change those people, if you want to change that religion, then what you have to do is push for reform, but also with some sense of respect for what the spiritual values that people take. I'm not a religious guy, but all I'm telling you is I know that world, and if you tell everybody, you suck, your religion sucks, clean it up, then it's going to get their backs up against the wall.
Let's say it's not even a religion. Let's say there's a social club that believes women are second-class citizens, gay people should be put to death, you should be put to death.
But that's not all 1.6 billion people.
Not all.
If they did feel that way, you'd have a lot more than a few terrorist attacks.
You do know, Fareed, come on, you do know
I've seen that same Pew survey that you quote every time this comes up, and I'm not disputing it. I'm not disputing it. One time, 4 years ago, Pew did this survey, and they got those numbers.
So you're saying in the Muslim world it is not a widespread belief that death is the appropriate response to leaving?
I don't know, because I didn't conduct that poll. All I'm telling you is that you go to those countries, you go to Indonesia, the largest Muslim country in the world, and they have lived happily with minorities. Women are given respect. Yes, is it as advanced as the West? No, but you don't have a huge problem of jihad there. The biggest problems you have are in pathologically dysfunctional Arab societies, which have had 40 or 50 years of repressive dictatorships in which they have driven all dissent into the most extreme places. But I began by saying, I have always said there is the word I've used is there is a cancer within Islam. Our difference is, how are you going to fix it? Do you really think you're persuading
honesty,
people with your...
First of all, with honesty.
You're not persuading people with what you're doing. You're getting applause lines in the West. It's totally different.
You know, that's insulting, that I'm doing this for applause lines.
Well, I'm telling you, the reality is you're not changing those people. You're not changing an average Egyptian.
Well, but let's
So, yeah, I thought that was an interesting exchange on this perennial topic of Islam between Fareed Zakaria and Bill Maher. And in my opinion, it's pretty clear that Fareed won that argument and Bill Maher lost that argument. There was even this part in the middle where Bill Maher started making his analogy argument. Let's not even talk about religion. What if it were a social club that believed all the bad things that I can pick out of this religion? And I was thinking to myself, what would you name that social club? The straw man social club? Because the whole point that I was trying to make before, that was not one of the points that Fareed Zakaria made there, though I agreed with several really good points he did make, was that there are so many good and bad parts of these major Abrahamic religions, or Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, that to say that any one of those religions is the motherlode of bad ideas, I don't know. There are a lot of places where you can look for bad ideas, and I'm sure you can find a lot of bad ideas in religion and a lot of good ideas. I mean, the whole point is to use your rational mind and decide what's good and what's bad. And if that's the way you approach the world, if you have a religious tradition, I don't think that's really going to make much of a difference. As long as you have the right values, that you choose what parts of it are the good parts, I guess. And the thing is, there are always interpretations. Some people say, I think there's a clip that I'm not going to show where I think it was Bill Maher claimed that it's the moderates who have hijacked the religion, but I don't think that's true. And I want to show a couple more quick clips before I end the show from the exchange between Bill Maher and Fareed Zakaria. Most of it was like little sniping back and forth where Bill Maher referred to Fareed Zakaria while he was talking on some other subject. And that was the case when he was talking to Dave Barry about how little he knew about children, and it turned back into the Islam question, sort of, over in this clip.
Everything I know about kids comes from what I see in movies or on airplanes. Or
very good sources.
And sometimes movies I see on airplanes.
Yeah.
But they just look like real assholes. I mean, they really do. And
all children look like that to you? But then they get to be like you when they grow up. So then it's worth it.
He's bitter about being wrong on the Muslim thing.
I don't think so. I think he got in another little good poke there at Bill Maher. But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section while I play you the final clip of the show tonight. This is also from Bill Maher, where he talked about this weird petition in California to get on our ballot initiative, in the ballot initiative process, the Sodomite Suppression Act that this lawyer in Orange County, California, came up with because of our biblical, in the Christian Bible it says, and even in the Jewish Bible it says that homosexuality is an abomination and that homosexuals should be killed. So the Sodomite Suppression Act said that in California we could kill gays and lesbians, and then it would have to get all these signatures to get on the ballot, and it's been kind of controversial, even though it would never really get on the ballot. And Bill Maher started talking about that, and then switched over to the Muslim countries where they're even worse on, they actually do put homosexuals to death. And there was a little sniping back and forth, or I guess a reference to Fareed Zakaria again in the final clip of the night here.
Now, is California really going to consider Mr. McLaughlin's gay-killing bill? Of course not. But as batshit as this asshole is, just imagine if there was a whole country of Matt McLaughlins. Well, there is. It's called Saudi Arabia. It's called Iran. It's called Pakistan. I could go on, but suffice it to say that in many Muslim countries, you wouldn't have to work hard at all to get signatures on your Kill All the Gays ballot initiative. In 10 such countries, it's already the law. Because they have crazy scripture too. Muhammad says of sodomy, kill the one who does it and the one to whom it is done. Especially him, because he probably likes it more. He didn't say that part. People say ISIS hijacked Islam. No, actually the opposite is true. Religions do have hijackers, but the hijackers are the moderates, and I thank atheist God for them. They're the ones who took a Sharpie to the Bible and redacted all the crazy parts until there was almost nothing left to read, like an email from Hillary Clinton. And now someone in Islam needs to do that with the Quran. You know, there's so much wrong with America these days. Take pride in the one thing that is legitimately better. We don't let fundamentalists rule our shit.
Well, I hope that's true, although I think fundamentalists have a significant amount of power in the United States, not as much as they do in those Muslim countries that Bill Maher was talking about, although that part where he said, you know, in many countries they don't need ballot initiatives because it's already the law, as if they even have ballot initiatives in those countries. Those are like dictatorships, and there's sort of an alliance between these, you know, right-wing monarchs. If you're talking about Saudi Arabia, I don't know Brunei, but Saudi Arabia, there's sort of an alliance between the right-wing or the conservative monarchy and the conservative religious leaders, and I don't think you can just talk about them having ballot initiatives. It's just silly. But anyway, that's pretty much the show for you tonight. You can let me know what you think of all the clips I picked out for you and the topics. I kind of skipped Cuba. Sorry about that. That there was a handshake and meeting between Obama and Raul Castro, and I didn't really want to cover that because I didn't think there was much news. But there was some talk about lifting Cuba out, or taking Cuba out of the list of nations that sponsor terrorism, and that may be coming up. So maybe I'll cover that in a future show. I am hopefully working on another edited, produced video, a Fox News bias video on this Madison, Wisconsin law, the way they covered it, saying that it's a travesty that they're not letting employers decide not to hire atheists. So hopefully I'll be able to finish that sometime this week. And I never put up an excerpt video last week, but I'll try to do that this week, especially if I don't have the edited, produced video up. Like I said, if you are one of the people who posted one of these many comments, I guess I have at one point over 140 people, still over 130 people watching. I appreciate all of you who kept me company live, and I will save your comments and put a link down to my Patreon page where you can support my videos, or just look at all those live comments if you're interested. There seem to be more live comments than people who post comments as a recorded show, but I appreciate all of you who comment, all of you who join me, and I'll be doing the show again next week at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time, or thereabouts, as my live viewers know. I always seem to be a little bit late. I'm sorry about that, but hopefully I'll be closer to on time next week, and until then I'll be seeing you all around the internet.